Are you tired of not understanding F1 tyres? Do you hear your friends, commentators and people on the internet leave you in the dirty air with their fancy tyre talk? Are you simply wanting to daydream your race mornings away, thinking about tyre compounds and pit stops to your Pirelli tyre-shaped heart's content? Well, you're in the right place, because here at Grand Prix, we are revving up to give you your first F1 Tyre 101 crash course. We'll be serving up everything you need to become the grandest, clued-up prick around. Now, F1 has been around since the 1950s and has seen a lot of different tyre suppliers up and down the grid, including Bridgestone, Michelin, Goodyear, Continental, Engelbert, Pirelli, Dunlop, and probably more. Tyres are such a hot topic. There was even a tyre war that happened over the decades of the sport, with multiple brands like Dunlop, Goodyear, and others competing from the 1950s to the early 1990s. The famous example of this era was between 2001 and 2006, when Bridgestone and Michelin competed as tyre suppliers. The tyre manufacturers would compete fiercely, developing and supplying tyres tailored to the needs of their favoured teams. This could involve close collaborations between teams and suppliers and lead to disagreements about the fairness in the sport. And every single driver and constructor championship in F1's 75-year history has been a nail-biting fight, powered by incredible individuals. But lurking in the background, the unsung heroes are the race strategists, the masterminds who can turn a driver's skill into a race-winning masterclass. We're about to dive in and see what makes a race strategy tick and explain why it really is a fine art to perfect. So let's get this rubber-burning, strategy-slinging, tyre-spinning, mother-trucking thing started.
What an intro.
Thank you so much.
Who let her cook?
Gemini.
At least she's honest. All right, so we're going to break this episode down into 3 parts, I believe.
Also welcome.
Oh, yeah, hi. Hello. So we're going to break this episode down into 3 parts. First off, Reem, we're going to give you a tyre history lesson.
Ooh.
We're going to... She's so excited,
Very.
Can you tell?
Can't wait.
Part 2, we're going to look at what tyres are like in 2025. And for part 3, we are going to dive into how tyres play into strategy. Which of the 3 parts are you most excited about?
None.
Why are you so opposed to tyres?
I don't know. I don't watch F1 and think about the tyres.
I'll tell you one thing. You can't say that. Imagine all of the cars line up on the grid. None of them have tyres on. How fast are they moving, Ray?
Imagine watching football and then someone telling you, I'm going to give you a history lesson on balls.
Pause. Actually, pause.
No, thank you.
Moving on.
So I'll try to be excited. Great intro.
So over you. So, let's get started. Why are tyres so important in F1, Reem?
They let you drive.
Brilliant.
She's not wrong.
She's not wrong. But simply put, the tyres are the only point of contact between the car and the track. So, F1 cars can speed upwards of 300 kilometres an hour, can head into corners at head-spinning speeds, and also be exposed to massive G-forces. With all of that going on, the car needs to be stuck to the surface, and that is the job of the tyres. But the decision of what tyres to fit, what compound, when to change them, and when to manage them is a strategic one done by all the teams each session in a race weekend. And that's why we're talking about it this ep.
Okay.
So it is. Who makes the tyres?
Ooh, okay. Pirelli. Do you want me to do an accent so you can guess where they're from?
Sure.
Pirelli.
That was such a vague accent.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, Pirelli.
Italian.
Yes.
Ah.
Easy peasy. Yes, Pirelli are an Italian manufacturer and they're the sole tyre supplier for Formula One. They've been the sole supplier since 2011 and in 2023 they signed a contract with Formula One to be the exclusive tyre supplier to the World Championship until 2027 with an option to extend.
Now, Reem, you may have heard the term slick tyres.
I have not heard that term.
Oh my God, have you been watching the races with your ears open?
Does that not mean anything?
I don't remember that, no.
Really? Oh.
No.
You've heard of dry tyres though?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the same diff.
Slick, okay. Slick tyres and... Is it slick?
Yeah, slick.
Slick
Yeah.
tyres and dry tyres. So does that just mean wet tyres?
No,
No.
it means dry. It means dry tyres.
No, I genuinely haven't heard it.
No, slick tyres and dry tyres are the same thing.
Oh, so just say dry tyres.
But they're called slicks. It's a type of tyre.
Okay.
It's specific to F1.
Okay.
Okay, Nav, do you want to explain who came up with slick tyres? Maybe also what the fuck they are.
So slick tyres are dry tyres.
Okay.
The tyre supplier Firestone bought slick tyres without any tread. Do you know what tread is?
No.
Oh, dear Lord. Do you know what a tyre is?
I know it's a wheel.
It's a wheel. Okay, so you know a typical road car.
Yeah.
Let's imagine. Oh my god, the viewers don't know that none of us have a car. Okay, so you know, like on your Tesla, it's got like loads of.
No, Tesla's been cancelled, not Tesla.
Oh, okay. You know,
Ferrari.
no, we've got to be unbiased. Okay, you know,
On your Volkswagen.
your Volkswagen camper, electric, because we want to sound.
Dream.
Yeah. Okay, so your electric Volkswagen camper van that you have with the seats that turn round, so we all go. We're recording on it right now. You
And
know,
the square steering wheel.
you know that car.
It's my dream car.
Okay.
You know that car that you own right now?
Yeah.
That we're all sitting in with ample amounts of space and room. Yeah.
Which is soundproofed.
Yeah,
Which is why
exactly.
you can't hear
Yeah.
the cars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, open up that door. Yeah, well done, Reem. If you just lean... This is so stupid. If you just lean out, can you see the marks on the tyres that road cars have?
Like the patterns that's on like the rubber part of the tyre.
Look at it,
The
Reem.
Doc Martens have a pattern.
What?
Yeah, on the sole.
Yes.
Like on the sole of a shoe.
Okay.
Yes.
You're
yeah.
taking the mick. I've done a whole segment about you just pretending you're in a car and you're bringing up shoes.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to put it in terms that I understand. I
Which-
don't know what a Volkswagen is.
Reem, you're not even looking at the tyre.
I don't know what a Volkswagen is.
You're looking at a camper van. I can beep out of this situation. I'm not doing this.
Oh dear Lord. Okay.
We've done so much research. You're not gonna. There's no point. We're gonna spend 30 minutes
Wasted on
explaining
you.
what a
It's
tyre is.
so wasted on you. Right. So Firestone bought slick tyres without any of those Doc Marten patterns on them
Okay.
to the 1971 Spanish Grand Prix. By the 1972 season, slicks became nearly universally adopted across Formula One. So tyres without any of the patterns, completely smooth tyres
Okay.
with no
No
dips.
branding.
No what?
No, they still had branding.
What?
They just didn't. Oh.
For Doc Martens, that's the branding.
Yeah, but... Oh my god. We're never winning awards for this podcast, and it's because of you.
Are you understanding yet why this episode is so essential for you?
I think it's wasted on me.
Okay, so in 1972, I'm just ignoring her at this point. In 1972, the slicks became universally adopted across Formula One.
It's a cool name.
Slicks,
The Slicks.
cool.
It's like a band.
All right. Later, the Formula One regulations mandated grooved tyres, so tyres with the dips and and the tread.
I didn't think this was going to go this bad. I thought it was going to be really professional.
I wanted to respond groovy. I laughed before saying it.
So the F1 regulations mandated grooved tyres from 1998 to 2008 as a measure to reduce cornering speeds. However, slick tyres were reintroduced for the 2009 season alongside aerodynamic changes, aiming to shift the balance towards mechanical grip and improved overtaking. How much of that meant anything to you?
Oh, okay. Let's do like call and response. Okay, so we've given you some info. Regurgitate it back. What did you take from it?
Okay, there was the Slicks. And they had the Doc Marten pattern.
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
They
my
didn't.
God.
They didn't have the Doc Marten pattern. And they were used by Firestone.
They were made by
Firestone
Okay.
and adopted universally by F1. And then they moved to some groovy tires.
Grooved.
No.
Grooved tires.
Which did have the Doc Marten stuff.
They had Doc Marten stuff, and it was something about cornering.
Yeah, reduced cornering speeds.
And I forgot the last bit.
Slick tyres, without any of the Doc patterns, were reintroduced in 2009.
Okay.
And have stayed that way
Okay.
since.
Okay. Why do I need that information?
Well, we're getting there.
Okay.
Well, because it's obvious stuff. You can see on the telly they haven't got any grooves, and yet we've had to explain it.
You have eyes.
I know that, but it means nothing.
Okay. So when Pirelli returned to Formula One in 2011 as the tyre supplier, they were instructed to create tyres with high degradation. Do you remember what degradation means?
Is it that thing where it's like sandpaper?
No, that's graining.
Oh.
Nice try, though. Love that for you.
Is it the pieces of the tires fall off?
Take it literally. Degradation.
Falling
Degrades.
apart.
Yeah. So they lose their grip quickly, basically.
Okay.
It's the wear on tyres.
Yeah. So in 2011, Formula One instructed Pirelli to create tyres that would fall apart quickly, meaning that tyres had to be changed more frequently to encourage more pit stops and increase the excitement for fans. However, drivers and some teams expressed frustration with this high degradation, arguing that they were being forced to drive below their potential in order to protect their tyres and conserve them instead of pushing for the fastest possible lap times. The goal was to make the tyres last for a shorter period of time, forcing multiple pit stops. So you can understand why drivers would get quite pissed off with that.
Yeah, I get their point of view. And also, I wonder how much the race results would change if they're allowed to keep their tyres.
Yeah, I mean, if the tyres were like wearing out so quickly that you would end up having to do, 3 pit stops a race, like that order would just change so much.
Yeah, I mean, as well, the tyre war that we mentioned in the intro was like, a lot of people consider that like a golden era of Formula One because they had multiple different tyre manufacturers that were competing against one another so that they could be able to be creating the fastest, best tyre, and they would kind of work with certain teams to be able to get tyres that worked best for this team that they're working with, to be able to get them to win races, to be able to continue to do business with them. So when it became just Pirelli were the only sole supplier and everybody across the grid used the same tyres, the FIA then asked Pirelli to create tyres with high degradation so that there was still excitement within the races, so that it wasn't that we'd gone from all this chaos and excitement of some tyres are working better than others and this team's using this tyre, this team's using that tyre, this person's doing a deal with this tyre supplier. Because there was only one, they wanted to still have the excitement and that sort of gamble, rolling of the dice effect that comes with doing strategy options, and having tyres with high degradation will always give you that.
Okay.
Yeah?
So they chose entertainment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is a common theme for this sport.
Cash is king, baby.
Then in 2017, the FIA released new regulations that saw Pirelli roll out new spec of tyres that had less degradation and instead focused on having more consistent performance, less overheating and increased speeds. The tyres for 2017 were 25% wider, with rears up from 325mm to 405mm, and the fronts from 245 to 305. This might not seem like a big deal, but if you think about pit stops, the engineers who are carrying out the pit stops, they have to carry those tyres. So if you've been used to carrying something that is, what's the math on this, like 80?
Oh, no, yeah, do it. Do the math right now.
80?
Oh, damn, you got it bang on. Normally she's quite bad with math.
If you are having to carry something that is now 80mm, 8 whole centimetres wider than what it used to be, like, that's going to be an adjustment for you, and also how you have a grip on it when you're fitting it onto the wheel rims and stuff like that. It's like a whole new learning thing for the engineers. So that on its own is like a big difference. And we saw it again in 2022 when they also changed the width of the tyres. It was like a big thing for teams to have to adjust to.
So they had to strength train the engineers.
Basically, yeah.
Especially for the 2022 ones that we'll get onto. Yeah, they did.
Damn.
So the diameter of the tyres also increased very slightly, though wheel rim size remained unchanged at 13 inches. Pirelli conducted extensive testing with Ferrari, Red Bull and Mercedes to evaluate the performance of these new tyres. So Pirelli provided 5 different dry weather, or slick, tyre compounds in 2017, and these had a colour coding system for easy identification during the race. So the hards, originally intended to be oranged, it was very rarely used in races, and this compound was the most durable but offered the least grip. The medium tyres were marked white, and that provided a good balance between durability and grip. The soft were yellow marked tyres, and it offered more grip than the medium but had a higher rate of degradation. You then had super softs, which are identified by red markings and provided even more grip than the soft, but degraded even more quickly. And then you had ultra soft, which was the softest compound, marked in purple, offered the most grip for a very, very limited time, making it particularly useful for a single fast lap in qualifying.
Okay.
It was quite a confusing time, really. They had loads of... So they had the soft, super soft and ultra soft. It felt like you had the super duper whooper soft and you had the hyper soft and you had the extra ultra softs.
It was supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Exactly. It became a bit confusing, but ultimately the ultra softs were mainly used for qualifying because you could do a couple of laps and they'd be absolutely ruined because they were the softest tyre you could have, but they were fast as anything. But I personally prefer what we have now, which is just soft, medium and hard, because having hard, medium, soft, super soft and ultra soft became far too confusing. And also we didn't seem to see the hard tyre that much because you had so many other ranges. You had 5 different tyres. It would end up being that the medium would be that, you know, the hard we have now, and then they'd go down that range. But it was a fun time because remembering soft, super soft and ultra soft, even though it doesn't sound that difficult, felt confusing as anything at the time.
Yeah, because everyone was on different things and it was just like, oh my God, what are they all doing?
And also soft, super soft and ultra soft all became very blended into one thing because it was very much like, I don't know, what the bloody hell's the difference?
It's a soft.
Exactly. But that was a fun time. Glad they got rid of it.
Yeah.
But then 2022 is when it all became quite exciting because the FIA introduced these new technical regulations that saw back these ground effect cars that we'd seen earlier in the sport in the 70s and 80s. But the whole goal was to make sure that we could have closer racing. The regulations were set to be introduced in 2021, but there was this tiny little thing called COVID-19 of the pandemic which delayed it all, so it then was released in 2022. The new Pirelli compounds and constructs they were 18-inch. Now, how many were the last ones that we just talked about?
40?
Incorrect.
So close.
13?
Yeah.
Correct.
Damn.
So they went up 5 inches and they were designed to work in tandem with the new aerodynamic rules of these new cars that we're now seeing on track today. Before the 2022 ground effect era generation of cars we have now, the main factor stopping close racing was the massive amount of downforce that the cars lost when they were following a car closely. So when you see, obviously we have DRS, when a car is right behind a leading car, they're trying to overtake. Before the 2022 ground effect cars that are all about aerodynamics, these cars that we had before that, they were not as aerodynamically efficient. So all of that air was being chunked out of the back of them, and the car that was trying to overtake behind would slide around a lot.
Can I ask a question? I don't mean to be patronising. Do you know what we mean by aerodynamic?
No.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean by aerodynamic?
No.
No. You're kidding. Really?
Do you know what like streamline means? Like when you I'm gonna give Reem a Reem analogy.
This episode's gonna be 4 hours long.
Yeah.
It needs to be 2 boards.
This will be wrapping up and then we're watching Miami Grand Prix. What did I say? Miami Grand Prix.
Girls, we're losing it. Right, I'm gonna
you
give,
just don't know what aerodynamic means.
I know, I'm gonna give her a Reem style analogy.
Overestimate to be.
So you know when you have the Olympic swimming team?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know how they have to be clean shaven and they have to wear the swimming caps?
Yeah.
That's to make them as streamlined as possible so they can move through the water as streamlined as possible. If they have their hair loose and they have hair on their body, it's adding like resistance and like friction to how easily they're able to move through the water.
Okay.
Aerodynamic is basically like that. It's how the air is able to travel through the car and move out of the way of the car.
Okay.
So, look at that F1 car I have up there.
Yeah.
It's got lots of bits sticking out of it and it's all like different shapes and stuff. The aerodynamics is how because when they're going so fast, they're punching a hole through the air. It's how the air moves around the car and doesn't reduce their speed.
Okay.
So it's like air resistance, making sure that it's able to like slide through the air and not like, you know how like parachutes, you know parachute, right? When it opens, it's trapping all of the air underneath it, and that's what makes you go down slowly. She just looks so confused. I'm just trying to get as many.
Looking at you, I was laughing at the pause up. She didn't say yes instantly what a parachute was. I wasn't judging you, Nav. We're trying.
I was going to say I got it from the Olympics.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, we won't go into parachutes then. I won't overcomplicate things.
How many analogies are you going to be able to give?
Work on your facial expressions. You weren't giving I know what she's talking about.
You were giving I'm even more confused than last time. Okay, we've covered aerodynamics. Great. Moving back to 2022.
Oh my god.
Ground effect cars.
I don't really know what to say. Oh god. Okay. Okay. This had bigger tyres, right? Just move on. That's all.
No, keep going.
Okay.
Our audience isn't as dumb as Reem.
Okay, right.
Hey, you might be isolating some of our ideas of the I am with you and I support you.
Great. So the F1 cars before these new 2022 ground effect cars that we're still seeing on track now and will do until the new regulations change in 2026, those cars were at that time lost 35% of their downforce when running 20 metres behind a leading car. But the 2022 generation of cars was said to reduce those figures down to 4%. The generation of these F1 cars are called ground effects cars. They push the car closer to the ground. And we've seen that this can affect how the tyre temperatures are impacted throughout the lap based on how that car interacts with the air particles around it.
Okay.
People can't see it, but that grin of like, I don't really know what you're saying, flashed across your face. Yeah.
So Pirelli factored in more than 10,000 hours of indoor testing, 5,000 hours of simulation, and 70 virtually developed prototypes to create 30 different specifications, which were then tested by the teams across more than 20,000 kilometres. And now we have the tyres we have.
They're stringently tested. Pirelli and the FIA, they do work with the teams, you know, to be able to come up with these new tyres and new concepts and new cars and new innovations. And it's also very good for Pirelli themselves, because a lot of the technology they start to get the teams working on will then translate to road cars. So that's why they are constantly pushing, for example, the 2026 cars pushing for biofuels, because they are going to be using all of that information to then be able to translate over to road cars for residential people. Is that what you call them?
Yeah, just normal people.
Civilians.
We're just normal men.
Just normal men. I can't say that. I can't say for normal men. So, it's a meme. Yeah, just normal people will be able to have the benefit of the innovations happening in Formula One, because that technology will translate over into the domestic side of the market. That's a better way of saying it.
Go on.
Come on, podcast.
How often do the regulations change?
The regulations change as much as the FIA and F1 wants them to, essentially.
Oh, so there's no set time?
No, because, I mean, we had, in 2014, there was a big turbo hybrid era where they started to go to hybrid engines, and that was the biggest overhaul of the regulations in the sport we'd seen for a very long time, which then saw Mercedes win 8 constructors' titles back to 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 back. So the regulations then stayed like that until we introduced to 2022, where they had this very, very different way of racing, which we've now then going to be followed up with the 2026 regulations. The reason for these regulations all have a place in it. A lot of it is down to being able to create more competitiveness, be able to have a fairer set of regulations, be able to create competitive racing, be able to have cars being able to follow and overtake easier. But on top of that, the sport wants to innovate all the time. So the 2026 regulations is going to be yet another huge overhaul, because it's going to be moving away from aerodynamics and it's going to be going on to active aerodynamics. It's going to be on to biofuel. The car's going to be smaller and lighter and tighter and everything. So they do them to be able to continually try and challenge the teams, try and make their window of operation and innovation smaller, to be able to see that they can create even bigger innovations out of it. So it's to keep it interesting, to keep everyone on their toes, and to keep it competitive.
But on top of that, Formula One as a whole has a target to become net carbon zero by 2030. So a lot of it as well is sustainability development and goals that they're setting.
Well, so all the teams have the same tyres then?
Yes.
They all have the same type of tyres?
Yes.
They all have the exact same tyres, they all have the exact same wheel rims, but I think the wheel nuts themselves are individualised to each team's. So the part where the mechanics, when the driver comes into the pit lane, the mechanics will then use a wheel gun to be able to drill onto it, and it will very quickly... Perfect noise. Actually, perfect. 10 out of 10. Makes that noise. Go again. Perfect. It wasn't literally the exact same noise twice. You're a robot. It undoes the wheel nut, which means that the tyre can then release off that. That is unique to the teams, because the teams have their own systems and their own ways of building them, and every team has those slightly variations, and that's unique IP to that team. But everything else all comes from Pirelli. They all have the same type of tyres, and that's all done because they want to have a level playing field as much as they can.
All right. Congratulations, you have made it through part 1. How much do you think you've learnt?
I know what slicks are.
Mm-hmm.
What are they?
What
are they?
Type of tyre.
Cool.
Without the pattern.
Yeah.
I know what grooves are.
What are they?
They have the pattern.
Well, no, the grooves are the pattern. It's the tread. It's just another word of saying tread.
Pattern.
Yeah.
Choosing the word pattern to be annoying.
I know.
Just
I've remembered. I know that there used to be ultra soft and too soft. Whatever they were, and they've now changed it as of the newest regulations. It's now hard, medium, soft.
Not the newest regulations.
Oh. As of recent regulations, it's now hard, medium, and soft. And 2026, things will change because it's about active aerodynamics.
Yes.
Biofuel, sustainability.
Beautiful.
Wow, okay.
Now we're going to go into tyres in 2025.
Ooh.
So, Pirelli's range of 18-inch tyres for the 2025 campaign comprises of 6 slick compounds. From hardest to softest, we've got the C1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, along with intermediates and full wets. We'll get onto those later. The C6 is the new ultra-soft compound, which is expected to be used at certain street circuits, with drivers sampling it at a special practice session at last year's Mexico City Grand Prix and the Abu Dhabi post-season test. From the C1 to the C6 slick range, that's hard to say, Pirelli pick 3 compounds to be used at each Grand Prix, taking into account track characteristics and climates, the hardest trio chosen for venues where the tyres are generally subjected to the greatest demands and vice versa. The highest number of slick tyres is marked red for the weekend and known as the soft tyre. The middle choice is marked yellow and is known as the medium, and the lowest numbered is marked white, known as the hard tyre, all sitting alongside the green intermediates and the blue full wet tyres.
Quiz. If Pirelli decide for the Miami Grand Prix, just for example, that they are going to be using the C2, C3 and C4, which are the hardest tyres?
C2...
Yes, well done. C2 would be the hard, C3 would be the medium, and C4 would be the soft. Well done, Reem!
Thank you, I'm listening.
What colour are the softs?
White.
Incorrect. I love the confidence.
Oh, red.
What colour are the mediums?
Blue.
No. Again, confidence. What colour are the hards?
White.
Yes.
Thank you.
So what colour are the mediums?
Red.
You just said that for soft.
No.
You just said that and we said no.
Yellow?
Yes.
Okay.
What colour are the softs?
Red.
Yes. So I'll ask it again. So the white tyres are
hard.
The yellow tyres are
medium.
The red tyres are
soft.
Perfect. We'll cut out the bit where you fucked up multiple times.
No, we won't. So, what are the differences? In theory, the soft compound will offer the most amount of grip, but only for a short period of time before they degrade.
When would that be useful across a race weekend?
Qualifying.
Yes.
Well done.
Good work.
Making them ideal for qualifying runs. That was the next line on my script. The hard compound is the opposite, lasting for much longer, but offering less grip and slower lap times as a result.
They take longer to warm up.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, she pays attention.
I do.
I'm so proud. So the medium and hard compounds are likely to be more favourable options over a race distance.
Okay.
So, how many tyres do teams get over a race weekend and a sprint weekend?
Three.
What? No. I didn't want the question.
Oh, you're asking me.
No, it's just the title I've given it. On a standard Grand Prix weekend, drivers are given...
3.
No.
13.
13?
Yeah.
13 tyres?
Yeah. Well, 13 sets of tyres, not given 13. Why would they give them an odd amount of tyres? He says one for good luck.
Why do they get 13 sets of tyres?
Baker's dozen.
Baker's dozen. I'm just going to ignore your question because I'm going to answer it, but it's further down in my script if you wouldn't mind. They're given 13 sets of dry weather tyres, 4 sets of intermediates, and 3 sets of full wets. An extra set of soft tyres is reserved for those who reach Q3 in qualifying. So, by the new record that Lance Stroll has set, he never gets given an extra set of softs.
Poor sod.
Yeah, poor soft. All drivers must use at least 2 different types of slick compounds during the race, providing the track is dry. So that is just to promote the fact that they want to have teams coming in having mixed tyre strategies to create a more interesting spectacle for the race. And at sprint events, the allocation of tyres drops from 13 sets to 12, drivers getting 2 sets of the designated hards, 4 of the mediums, 6 of the softs. The total number of wet weather tyres remains the same at 7, but becomes 5 intermediates and 2 wet sets.
Let's see if you can answer this question. Why do you think they get less tyres for a sprint weekend?
Oh, I don't know.
For listeners at home, whenever you hear Reem say, ooh, that means I have no fucking clue.
I think they'd give them more tyres if it's sprint weekend.
No, so during a normal race weekend, you have free practice 1, 2 and 3, but for a sprint weekend, you only have free practice 1.
Okay.
So practice sessions are usually, around an hour?
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about it, they're not having a whole hour of racing 3 times before they even get to quali or the race. They would instead have 1 practice session and then a qualifying session and then a 1-hour race. So they don't need as many tyres because of that qualifying session, essentially reducing the amount of running time that they have for like race simulation, pacing and stuff like that.
Okay, makes sense.
Rock-a-bye baby on a treetop. I'm sorry, I'm just wrapping up a small child into... No, that sounds crazy.
The fuck?
Please cut that out. That was uncomfortable.
I don't even know where you were going with that. Was that your segue into tyre blankets?
Yeah.
Okay, that was a choice.
Okay, never mind. Okay. Ooh, what was that? 'Cause he lives. Everyone's not... Trying to jazz up quite a dull segment.
You've done it well.
Sorry, okay. God, I'm so in a state. Sorry, okay.
When you're ready.
I think it's like slightly embarrassed, slightly finding it hilarious all in one. Okay, sorry.
Should be.
Okay, thank you.
You're crying.
I'm sorry, I'm really up. Okay. Whew. Now in the UK...
Oh no, just drop this.
No, I don't want
that
to.
you're going for.
It's fun.
Okay, do it properly then.
Now, Reem, I'm going to hit you with something that is relatable. In the UK, we've all been suffering from the 'cause he lives. Does that mean that you've been using more blankets than usual?
No, it's currently spring.
No, no, play along. Okay, does that mean does that mean you've been using more blankets?
Specifically in the winter period?
Yes.
Yes, because it's too expensive to put the heating on, right? So
Yes.
you'd like to be tucked up like a nice toasty Pirelli tyre.
Where is this going?
You're just confusing her more.
Going?
I'm going to rewind. What is the protocol for tyres at a race weekend? Cut all of this. Cut all of it. I actually don't know what. I don't know what.
Can you make it social club?
Yeah.
No. Okay. So, to achieve the working window for all of these tyres, the team choose to heat the tyres before they go onto the car and to the track. The teams will take the tyres, wrap them up in a big tyre blanket, and then it will wrap up over the tyre surface and over the tyre sidewalls. These blankets have an electrical heater inside them to maintain the tyre temperature, which you can relate to because you have an electric blanket.
It doesn't work anymore.
Well, the ones that...
Can you imagine if, like, Max's engineer sends him out with really cold tyres and just like, sorry, our electric blankets don't work anymore.
Because he lives, mate. What do you want me to do?
So I have 2 questions. Is it an actual blanket?
No.
Oh, and
Well, no, it's not like a child's blanket. It's not like a
a blanket. So in my head, I'm thinking
No.
like electric blanket.
Little bows on it.
And then my second question is...
Can I answer your first question?
No. Why do I need to know this?
I think it's important to understand the journey the tyres go on because
Why?
because we're all invested in the drivers, but I don't think the tyres get enough talk. So here we are.
They don't have feelings.
You don't know that. Okay, so so the first question is, it's not like a little cozy blanket like that you would like snuggle up to.
I'm just going to show Reem a picture of a tyre blanket.
Okay, Nav's going to show you a photo because I don't think I can answer that question.
That's a tyre blanket. It's
Oh, that doesn't look like a blanket.
No, it's essentially just it's sort of like a winter coat for a wheel. It's like a big piece that wraps around the wheel, and then they have something that goes on this front part to cover it. So in the end, they look like that.
Okay, why do I need to know this?
Because it's polite to listen to your friends. Pirelli sets a limit on the heaters, and you can't have the heater on the tyres all day or overnight because that might gain teams an advantage. So instead, they only are allowed to heat them for 3 hours. And the temperature is also set at 70 degrees for dry tyres. There's also minimum pressures that are decided by Pirelli at each track, and teams will need to adjust these pressures so that they are correct. If they're not correct, they can be done for fraud. No, they can be done for
Cheating.
Oh.
The teams will fit the tyres with the blankets still on right before a race, and once the teams have to get the tyre blankets off, the mechanics will often lay the blankets just over the top of them to keep more temperature. That's how crucial temperature in tyres are. So when drivers are complaining about having lack of grip, having lack of temperature, all of these things before a race are trying to help them have the maximum and the best start they can have off the line. After the race, the tyres will be weighed to see the wear and also to see the minimum weight of the car, because all the cars get weighed after the race. And then the FIA will do a lot of post-race technical checks to make sure that they are all adhering to the regulations. As we saw in China with Ferrari, both their cars, for different reasons, as well as Gasly from Alpine, were disqualified. It was in those post-race checks that they actually found that. The teams will often use a small handheld heater to warm up the tyres, and then they'll use a little metal scraper tool to take up all the pickup off the tyre. What they're trying to see if there's any abrasions, artefacts or issues with the tyres. They'll have tiny holes all over the tyres, which will then be used with an instrument to measure and analyse the wear of the tyres by seeing how many millimetre the tyre has lost throughout that race, and also see if there's different levels of wear on the inside and outside of the tyre. This is all done so that Pirelli can continue to analyse these tyres and to continue to see if there's any more changes, any things that are going wrong with it, and improvements they can make in the future. Once this is complete, the tyres will then be washed and they'll be ready for their recycling. How cute.
Doesn't seem very sustainable.
Well, funny you should say that, Reem, because I've got a whole bit on this for you.
Ooh!
So, as you know, each driver gets 13 pairs of tyres. There's 24 races, so that's 312 sets of tyres.
That's insane.
Yeah. And then if you times that by 20, because there are 20 drivers, that is 6,240 sets of tyres over this year in F1
Bloody
alone.
hell.
That's a lot.
That adds up.
Although I will say, they're slightly less because I've done that for a standard Grand Prix weekend, not taking into consideration the sprint races.
Boo, sloppy work. Down with this podcast.
That's crazy when you consider like people who drive cars normally only change their tyres once a year.
Do they?
Yeah.
No, they change their tyres way less frequently than that.
Oh, my sisters don't know how to drive then.
Oh. Out your sister like that.
Wait, less or more?
Less frequently. They don't.
Oh, okay, never mind. She doesn't know how to drive. And then if they have to, they do it once a year. But
why is she
can last
changing her tyres
longer.
onay a year?
We had the car breakdown this year.
Okay, but that doesn't mean she's changed them once every year.
I miscalculated.
Okay. So what happens to all of those tyres after they've been used? Well, Pirelli has a system in place to manage the used and even some of the unused tyres from each Grand Prix, because if you consider the fact that a lot of drivers might retire from races, or they might crash out on the first lap or whatever, and they don't complete the full lap, or they just don't use the tyres, there's lots of tyres that just don't get used. So as part of this system, step 1 is to collect and return all of the tyres to Pirelli. So every tyre that is brought to the track by Pirelli, whether it has been used in practice, qualifying, race, or even unused throughout the whole weekend, is then collected after the race. Pirelli collects all of the data from the used tyres, which is valuable for their research and development, and this helps them understand how the tyres have performed under race conditions, the rate of degradation, and how they have interacted with each of the different cars and different track surfaces. As is said, why aren't the tyres reused for the next race? Well, once a tyre has been mounted on a wheel rim, and especially after it has been used on track, even if just for a single lap, its structural integrity can be compromised when it is removed from the rim. Remounting a tyre could be risky in terms of safety and performance, and if teams were allowed to reuse tyres across different weekends, it could create an uneven playing field. Teams might have differing amounts of used tyres, and it would be difficult to ensure that all of the teams have access to tyres with comparable performance characteristics. The 3 slick compounds brought to each race are specifically chosen by Pirelli based on the characteristics of that track. So the same soft that is used in Miami is going to be different from the soft that is used in Jeddah, for example, just based on the track. So if you're using a used tyre from one event, it might not be optimal or the designated compound for the next.
Okay.
So there's a recycling process in place for all of these tyres. They're collected and transported to a recycling facility, primarily in the UK. There, they are shredded into small rubber pellets. The shredded rubber is often used as an alternative fuel source in cement factories,
I did not know that.
because cement production requires very high temperatures, and burning the rubber at these extreme temperatures, usually over 1,500 degrees Celsius, can provide a significant amount of energy.
That can't be good for the environment.
And the high temperature also helps to ensure that harmful fumes are not released. Fuck
Eat
you.
your words, girl.
I don't know, it still seems... I don't get why
You're wrong.
they wouldn't just...
You're wrong.
I don't get why they wouldn't just take the used tyres and then work on them and then reuse them again.
Well, just wait. So Pirelli and the recycling industry are also exploring and utilising other ways to repurpose the tyre materials. So for example, the recycled rubber can also be used as an additive in asphalt for road construction, can be used to create mats for various applications such as playgrounds or artificial turf, and can also be incorporated in the production of other rubber-based products such as plugs and hoses. Pirelli is committed to making its F1 operations more sustainable. Recycling the used tyres is a key part of this commitment. And starting from the 2024 season, Pirelli began using tyres made with Forest Stewardship Council certified natural rubber, further emphasising their commitment to sustainable sourcing. So keep your accusations, Pirelli ain't having them.
Damn, okay.
What the hoot and heck is mechanical grip, Reem?
I don't know.
Neither did I until I did some research. Okay, so mechanical grip is what all teams and drivers, engineers, and maybe even the catering teams want. Maybe not catering teams. It's an interaction between the F1 tyre and the track surface, and it's crucial because it directly influences the car's ability to accelerate, brake, and corner. It's the force that allows the car to change direction and maintain stability, and it helps the car maintain traction and grip in corners, especially at lower speeds where aerodynamic downforce is less significant. What does that mean to you?
I don't know.
Just move on. I don't know why it's there, to be fair.
So if you follow us on Instagram, you would have seen that on our story, we were asking people to submit their questions. So we are going to take an audience question now, which is, why are the tyres smooth and have no tread like a road car? So we're going back to tread. Remember what that is?
Pattern.
Yeah, well done you. So, the tread and the grooves on road cars are there to allow the car to handle a variety of different conditions and surfaces. For F1 cars, the treaded tyres would limit the amount of rubber in contact with the road. Slick tyres offer the largest contact area and give the best amount of traction needed for acceleration, braking and cornering. So it's coming back to that mechanical grip, right? So the grooves in the tread reduce the amount of rubber that is in contact with the surface, the track surface, effectively reducing the size of the contact patch. Contact patch is a small area of the tyre that is in contact with the road surface at any given moment. So the amount of grip a tyre can generate is directly related to the size of the contact patch and the friction between the rubber and the asphalt. Mm-hmm. Make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So on a dry track, a slick tyre provides the largest possible contact patch, and with no grooves or channels in the rubber, the entire width of the tyre is in contact with the track, maximising the area for the friction to occur. And this results in the highest possible level of grip, allowing the F1 cars to achieve those fast speeds around the corners and braking forces. On standard road cars, Tyre treads are essential for safety, especially in wet conditions. The grooves in the tread are designed to disperse water and provide grip.
Do intermediate and wet tyres in F1 have tread in them, or are they slick?
They are slick.
You are wrong.
Oh.
Nav, hit it with it.
So inters and wet tyres do have the treads in them, and the primary function of this is to channel water away from the contact patch between the tyre and the track. As the tyre rotates, the grooves push the water aside, allowing the rubber to make contact with the asphalt. Without a tread pattern in wet conditions, a layer of water can build up in the front of the tyre, causing the tyre to lose contact with the track surface, and this is known as aquaplaning, and it results in a complete loss of grip and control, making the car extremely dangerous to drive. So, the tread pattern on wet tyres provides this by efficiently removing the water. So with intermediate tyres, these are the first type of wet tyres to be used when it starts to rain or if the track is drying after rain. They have a tread pattern with grooves, but the grooves are shallower than full wet tyres. They're capable of displacing a significant amount of water per second, often cited at around 30 to 40 litres per second at those high F1 speeds, which is enough to maintain grip on the track with a moderate amount of water. They're considered more versatile than wet tyres, and they have a wider working range, meaning they can perform relatively well on a track that's still quite wet, as well as on a track that's beginning to dry out. This makes them a strategic choice during changeable conditions when a track is transitioning between wet and dry. Teams have to carefully monitor the track conditions to determine the crossover point, the moment where intermediates are faster than slick tyres, when the track is too wet for slicks, or when the slick tyres become faster than the intermediate tyres when the track is drying. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Be honest.
Partially.
Okay, what part isn't making sense?
I don't know, you spoke too fast.
Okay. Just listen back and slow me down.
Okay, so the ones... So slicks are for dry
Yes.
races. Treads are for wet races
Yes.
because they get the water away.
Yes, exactly that.
Okay.
So as well as intermediate tyres, you have full wet tyres, and that's used for heavy rain when there's lots of standing water on the track. And the reason for this is because they have a much deeper tread pattern than the intermediate tyres do, and as a result can displace much more water, often cited at around 65 litres per second at those high speeds, compared to the intermediates. And they become essential to prevent aquaplaning when there is lots of water on the track. Now, although they are designed for the heaviest of rainfall, full wet tyres are often used for very short periods, if at all, in modern F1 races. If the conditions are severe enough to truly require full wets, meaning there's lots of standing water, the race is often red flagged or not started due to the severe lack of visibility caused from the spray of the cars. While the full wets can technically handle the water, the visibility is still too poor to make racing safe, essentially.
That's fair.
I'll go on to that some more, but back to inters and full wets. They use a softer rubber compound than dry slick tyres. The softer compound is designed to work better at low temperatures, typical for wet conditions, and to generate heat more effectively. However, there can be slight differences in the compound of the intermediates and the full wets themselves. Full wet tyres sometimes have a slightly larger overall diameter than the slick tyres, which raises the car's ride height, making it less likely to aquaplane in deep water. As the wet track starts to dry, the intermediate tyre becomes faster than the full wets, and if a dry line starts to appear, it's crucial to switch to the intermediate tyres from the full wet to avoid overheating the wet weather tyres, which would cause them to degrade more rapidly and lose performance. Are we all clear on wet tyres?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Any questions?
What happens if you're in a race and it goes from very heavy rain to very dry and sunny?
That is down to the race strategists, along with the trackside engineers and also the drivers, all deciding and strategically choosing when the right time to switch over is. Because when it's really wet, you're going to have a lot of standing water, but as the drivers all take the same racing lines along the track, you'll start to see a drying track where all of that water is being dispersed by the intermediate tyres and they're going on to the other parts of the racetrack where it's not being touched. And so a line will start to appear in the middle of the road or wherever they're placing their cars. And as the weather starts to clear up, the sun comes out, it's going to continue to dry the track. So it'll go from a wet track to a slightly slippery track to a damp track and then a drying track. that little window of when the drivers decide to pit is very, very, very crucial to their race story. If they pit too early and they decide to go onto a slick tyre that has no tread, that isn't moving any of that water away, what's going to happen? They're going to crash, or they'll be really slow, or they'll just have a panic. If they do it too late and everyone else pits onto dry tyres and they've left it out there way too late and they're still on their intermediate tyres, they're going to be slow as the hoot and heck. So then they're going to lose places. Then they'll have to have even more time loss as they go in and change their tyres over. It's what's called fun to watch.
Yeah, you're not wrong at all. It is so fun to watch that.
What if it keeps switching? Like, what if it's... Because sometimes it's unpredictable weather, so it goes from rain to not raining anymore, to rain again, to not raining anymore, and they're 2-hour races, so a lot can happen in 2 hours.
Then we've got a fun and chaotic 2 hours.
Okay.
The teams will have a weather radar that they can all follow. As well as that, they also normally have people stationed around the vicinity just with an umbrella and a hand out, and being able to radio or phone call in and say, hey, it's raining over here, which means that the rain will probably be travelling over to you in this many minutes. So they're always checking the weather radar to be able to see what rain is coming, what the weather is doing. There has been instances where they've had short bursts of rain across one part of the circuit, and the drivers and the teams will decide to just stay on their dry tyres and hang it out because it shouldn't be too much water, and as long as they can just slow down in those sections, they don't need to change on to intermediate tyres or full wet tyres. But the point of it is that has happened and does happen where there's interchangeable weather, but it's the teams are always trying to optimise their strategy. They don't just, as soon as it's raining, they change onto wet, and as soon as it's sunshine, they change onto slicks. It's about being able to manage their race story according to what they think will be the fastest way to get to the end of the race. So it's all about feeling the track, getting feedback from the driver, being able to communicate that with the team, and being able to correlate that with the weather. So essentially, it's still a bit of a gamble, but it's all done on data that they're trying to gather live.
Okay, makes sense.
So we have another audience question, and it is about wet and intermediate tyres. So, if the teams have intermediate and wet weather tyres, why have there been races that have been stopped due to rain?
Very, very good question.
It is a very good question.
It's a question even drivers are asking themselves, I think.
Indeed. So F1 cars, especially at high speeds, generate a huge amount of spray in wet conditions. This is particularly true for the cars that are following the lead car. The large volumes of water thrown up by the tyres creates a dense and almost impenetrable mist.
When you see it on the onboard of someone that's, for example, in second place, following the person in first place when they are going racing, one, it looks like someone is just spraying a hose at them and at their face the whole time with the amount of spray that hits them. But two, when you're watching the onboard, all you can see is a whole view of spray and then just two little small blinking red lights which go on so that the car can see where they are. But in terms of where you're placing your car, trying to overtake, trying to place your car as you go into corners, looks near on impossible. So it's treacherous for those drivers out there.
So the drivers following in that spray have virtually zero visibility. They're essentially driving blind, unable to see the track, the cars in front, the braking zones, potentially any hazards like crashed out cars or marshals, and this is the primary and most dangerous reason for why red flags are thrown during heavy rain. Very heavy rain can lead to significant amounts of standing water on the track, which increases the risk of aquaplaning, which we spoke about just then when we were talking about the inters and wets. So the decision to red flag a race in the rain is made by the race director and the FIA. They constantly monitor the track conditions, the intensity of the rain, and the feedback from the drivers. If visibility becomes too poor or the risk of accidents is deemed too high, the race will be red flagged, which is stopped. The race will then remain red flagged until the rain subsides, the track conditions improve, and the cars are able to race safely, which can sometimes lead to very long delays.
It's really boring when you're watching it live, I've got to say. You're waiting for the rain to stop. Ugh.
Pirelli is constantly working to improve its wet weather tyres to enhance grip and water displacement, and the FIA and teams are also investigating ways to reduce the amount of spray produced by the cars in the wet conditions, and this includes testing devices like wheel covers with the aim of improving visibility for following drivers. There's an ongoing discussion in F1 about balancing the need for safety and the desire to have more wet weather racing. While safety is the top priority, some fans and drivers feel that races are red flagged too readily, denying the opportunity for exciting racing in challenging conditions. And I have some race examples for you here, Reem.
Ooh, what are they?
So, the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix. In August 2021, the race was heavily affected by torrential rain, and after several delays, the decision was taken to carry out a few laps behind the safety car before red flagging the race and not resuming it. So the race never started at the scheduled time it was meant to start because the rain was too heavy. Do you remember watching that, Is?
I do. It was very dull because it was also 2021, which was the titanic battle between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. We're very excited to see who was going to come out on top that weekend. And I'll tell you who came up on top, the rain.
Oh.
Yes, that's who won that race.
3 hours of our lives we're never getting back.
Yeah.
So they did a couple of laps behind the safety car. That was it. It was a processional race, essentially, in qualifying order. That was all they did. And half points were awarded as more than 2 laps, but the less than 75% of the race were completed.
When they postponed the race, do they ever postpone it to a different day? Or do they just cancel the race if they weren't able to do it on that day?
They just cancel it.
So, okay. If they cancel it, then there's no scores?
Well, in this example, they sent the cars out behind the safety car. They did 3 very, very slow laps. And as a result, because less than 75% of the race was completed, they only awarded half the points.
That's in the sporting regulations, is that's what happens if, in that example, when less than 3/4 of the race has been done, that's what you do.
So that's in the qualifying order, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so question. If the very rainy, dangerous day happened on the day of qualifying, what happens the next day?
Oh, Reem, I'm so glad you asked. So in 2024, for the Brazilian Grand Prix qualifying session, the FIA had delayed the start time for qualifying on a number of occasions, waiting for the rain to cease, before eventually postponing the session entirely. So in that instance, they then did qualifying the morning of the race.
Oh, okay.
Because they weren't able to hold the qualifying session. And F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali was being interviewed in the pit lane and said that the heavy rain made it impossible to run the F1 cars. Lewis Hamilton then walked out of his garage over to him in front of the camera, in front of the mics, and said, "I want to go out. If you give us better wet tyres and blankets, we'd be able to run in this." So he essentially was calling him out, like, we should be able to run, but...
Kind of iconic.
Yeah. The two shared a hug as Hamilton made it clear that there was no animosity or unfriendliness, but he was obviously very disappointed at the lack of running. And I mean, if you'd paid to go to watch it and you didn't actually get to see anything, you'd be a bit pissed off.
That's fair.
So you've made it through part 2 of this episode, which is Tyres in 2025, and part 3 is Tyres and Strategy. This is the exciting part of racing, personally.
Reem, what do you think the role of a race strategist in F1 is?
Someone who thinks of the plan of how you're going to race.
How you're going to race?
As in, what tyres do you choose? When do you do a pit stop?
Yes.
What... if your teammate is going to stay on as long as you...
Well, like contract-wise?
No. For a pit stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe quit there before you...
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. You stop, end on a high.
That was good.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, very, very well done. Unlike the rest of the engineers at the track, race strategists are not directly involved in improving the car. Instead, they take a more global view and focus on maximising results on the weekend with the car performance they have available. They spend the same amount of time analysing the competitiveness of their rivals as they do on themselves. As this data builds across a race weekend, it will create an overall picture of how a race is likely to pan out and is updated live, allowing strategists to quickly respond to track conditions and competitors' decisions. So, we have an audience questions. What is it about different tracks that would mean you use different tyre strategies? So, there are 3 main elements at the core of strategy simulation. So the first is tyre model. Understanding how each car interacts with its tyres allows teams to gauge the pace of their competitors and therefore how likely they are to be able to overtake. The tyre models are extremely complex and are based on hundreds of parameters and are continuously updated live during a race. To build a simplistic tyre model, you need 3 pieces of information. Base, pace. How fast is this new tyre? Second is tyre degradation. How much tyre performance decreases per lap? And finally, tyre life. How long will this tyre last? This information can be used to generate tyre curves that model the tyre performances per lap for them to easily see.
The second element at the core of a strategy simulation is free air optimization. So once the tyre models have been identified, the next stage is to understand the theoretical fastest strategy with the tyres available. To do this, teams conduct a free air optimization, which models only one car on track and assumes constant car performance and fuel consumption. Normalizing these factors allows different strategies to be easily compared. To work out which strategy is fastest, they plot the time loss per lap of each compound against the average lap time for each stint, then add in the time spent during pit stops. So there's lots of maths going on here.
That's why I don't get it.
The Monte Carlo simulation.
Italian.
Well, it's just,
No, Monte Carlo is in Monaco.
just adding a fun spin to it. I was trying to sound
Why are you
dramatic.
doing an Italian accent?
No, I was trying to just sound dramatic. Now it's time to model the influence of other cars on the race strategy. To do this accurately requires adding more parameters to build a clearer picture of how the race will likely pan out on a Sunday. Teams will also incorporate overtaking models, competitor performance metrics, and the effect of safety cars, fuel saving, and much more into their strategy simulations. They will need to use a strategical analysis method called the Monte Carlo to run a simulated race. This essentially identifies all the possible outcomes of a particular race scenario and the probability of each one of these outcomes occurring. They're basically not leaving anything to chance. They're trying to figure out the probability of things happening so they can factor it into their strategy on a Sunday.
I have a question.
Hit me.
And I might have cooked with this question.
Oh,
No,
yeah?
I didn't have.
I'm scared.
Because some of the tracks have existed for so long, like not all of them are new, like Saudi Arabia. Some of them have been new, for years since F1 started. What's stopping the teams from copying previous successful strategies that other teams have had in previous years?
Absolutely nothing. So
No, absolutely everything. Each year they come with
controversy.
each year they come with a completely different car. So what might have worked in one year won't have worked this year, but also global warming is a thing, which means that every year that you go to a track, the weather conditions are completely different. Something as small as 1 degree change in the temperature of the air will have an impact on the temperature of the track itself, and that will then play a role in the tyre performance of the car. And also, Pirelli will change the tyres for each year. So what worked last year in Miami isn't going to work this year in Miami because everything about it is completely different.
I would argue, though, they can still look back at previous years, be able to look at the track surface, how it interacted, what tyres worked for their car, what strategies worked better than others, and they can then start to figure out if that will be the same using the runtime they use in free practice sessions and qualifying to see the pace of their car respectively to the previous year. Yes, they're completely different, but their cars are still the same generation currently. The more development is becoming less and less as they kind of reach the ceiling with these regulations before they turn their head over to 2026. So you can still use a lot of that sort of strategy, as well as looking at old highlights from the previous year to understand where they can overtake, where they can maximise performance for the driver's side.
Yeah, I think you can use it as a template, but I think it would be very foolish for a team to just look at what they did last year and say copy-paste.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's then the job of the strategist to vary the inputs and run these simulations again to compare the results and understand which changes in inputs cause different results, positive and negatively. A simulation is only as accurate as its models and will always differ from reality in some way. They give the probabilities of particular outcomes, not definite results. Strategy simulations only form part of the decision-making process. The rest relies on the intuition and experience of the strategy department and, of course, how drivers and pit crews execute the strategy.
And because I know you love an example, I have got an example of how tyre strategy has won a race.
Okay.
And this strategy example is actually from a video that is available on the F1 YouTube page that Iz and I love to watch.
Yes, it's called Inside Story, Mercedes Strategic Masterclass 2021 Spanish Grand Prix. It's uploaded by Formula One, the broadcaster themselves. I would highly recommend anyone that hasn't seen it to watch it. It's a very, very, very good watch.
But for anyone who doesn't fancy watching it, I'll just summarise it here for you now. So, Lewis Hamilton secured a hard-fought victory by utilising a clever two-stop strategy. While Lewis Hamilton started on pole position, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull made a decisive and aggressive move at the start, outbraking Hamilton into turn 1 and taking the lead. He then led the majority of the race with Hamilton trailing behind. The Red Bull seemed to have good pace and Verstappen was managing to keep Hamilton at bay. With around 20 laps remaining, Mercedes made a crucial and ultimately race-winning strategic call. They pitted Hamilton for a second time, fitting him with fresh medium tyres. This was an aggressive move as it meant that Hamilton had to make up a significant time deficit to Verstappen, who was only expected to make a one-stop race. With the fresh tyres, Hamilton had a considerable tyre advantage over Verstappen, whose tyres were much older. And Hamilton then began a relentless chase, lapping considerably faster than Max. Despite Max's best efforts to defend, Hamilton's tyre advantage was too great, and he eventually caught and cleanly overtook Verstappen on lap 60 of 66, retaking the lead of the race.
Damn.
He then comfortably drove to the finish, securing his 98th career victory. Verstappen then pitted late for a fresh set of tyres to secure the fastest lap point, which used to be a thing, but this year has been removed, finishing in a still respectable second place.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's some information for you on how tyres play into strategy during a race weekend. In a dry race, every driver is required to make at least one pit stop and use at least 2 different slick tyre compounds during a race. This rule, by design, forces teams to consider different tyre strategies and adds a layer of complexity. This rule doesn't apply if a race is declared wet and drivers use intermediate or full wet tyres. So a common strategy is the undercut.
Oh, should we see if Reem knows what an undercut is?
Go for it.
I know you explained it. Undercut is if they pit before you and then they do a faster pit stop and then they are able to overtake.
So close. So a driver pitting a lap or few earlier than you, and therefore they can benefit from fresher and faster warming tyres. So the time gained on an out lap, which is the lap immediately after pitting on the new tyres, can be enough to overtake a rival when they eventually make their pit stop.
Okay.
So with that definition, what is an overcut?
When they don't pit at the same time as you and they stay on the track to build more seconds so that when they do pit, they're still ahead.
Yeah, exactly that.
Perfect.
So they manage the degradation well, and the rival's new tyres maybe struggle to warm up quickly. The overcutting driver can sometimes gain time and emerge ahead after they eventually do pit. So teams will either plan a 1-stop, a 2-stop, and sometimes even a 3-stop race based on the track characteristics, tyre degradation, and the expected race pace of their car. The more stops they make means that they have less time on track racing, but fresher, faster tyres more often. And by taking fewer stops, they save time by not having to go slowly down the pit lane. Because remember, there's a pit lane limiter that means that they have to drive slower in the pit lane. So each tyre has an optimal pit window, a range of laps where it's best to change tyres to avoid excessive performance drop-off or degradation, while still maximising the tyre's useful life.
Do you remember when I called Sergio Perez the tyre whisperer?
Yes.
Do you remember what that means?
He knows how to control his tyres.
Yes. So, drivers must be skilled at managing their tyres during a race. This involves a delicate balance of pushing hard for lap time, so they're not going too bloody slowly, and also being able to minimise the amount of tyre wear and overheating, thus ruining their race. A driver's driving style can actually really impact their tyre degradation. So a smooth, consistent style, I'd say Alex Albon might be a good example of that. He's got quite a smooth driving style. It's generally better for tyre preservation, whilst an aggressive style might be faster initially but lead to faster tyre degradation. So drivers are in constant communication with their engineers on the pit wall, add that to the words of wisdom, providing feedback on tyre performance, degradation and temperatures. This information is crucial to the team's strategists who are making informed decisions about pit stops and strategy adjustments. Now, some tracks are more abrasive than others. What does that mean?
They're rougher.
Yes, which means that they wear out the tyres faster. The layout of the track with a mix of corners and straights also influences tyre wear and the optimal strategy. Higher temperatures generally lead to faster tyre degradation, so strategists need to consider the expected temperatures when planning out their tyre choices. Safety car periods and red flags can significantly impact tyre strategy. They provide a free pit stop. What do you think a free pit stop means?
It doesn't take away from their time.
Yes, very right. So the drivers lose less time pitting under the safety car because all of the drivers are going at a much slower speed. They slow right down, there's no overtaking happening. And as the safety car then trundles out to the pits and then drives around the circuit to then go ahead of the race leader, all of that, they're all doing at much slower speeds. So going into the pits in that time means you lose less time and then you can go and slot back in again. The same with a red flag. Teams and engineers are able to make changes to the car, including changing tyres. So they will all retire back to the garage, and if they want to, they can then put on fresh tyres, which means that they don't need to do it during a live race, because then they will be doing a rolling start or a pit lane start.
Which has been a bit controversial, hasn't it?
It has, hugely,
Lots of teams don't think that, well, it's one of those things. Teams don't like it when they're the ones losing out from it, but they love it when they're the ones that gain an advantage from it.
Exactly.
They just won't complain.
Yeah. Hence why it hasn't been changed.
What Karens?
Because the FIA will have half of them saying it's great and the other one saying absolutely it's not, and then the next race weekend it'll be the opposite.
Yeah, completely.
Accidents and other on-track incidents bring out safety cars or red flags, and that can then disrupt the planned strategies and forcing the teams to have to adapt.
So we've got some examples here of when races have been impacted by safety cars and red flags. So red flags we'll start with, which is when the race is completely stopped for however long it takes to clear the track. So the first example we have is the 2020 Italian Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc crashed out of the Monza race on lap 25 of the Italian Grand Prix in 2020, with the crash initially being covered by a safety car. It was then, however, red flagged, but Pierre Gasly hadn't pitted, whereas people in front had all pitted under that safety car period. And so Gasly, who was then running in third place, was able to change his tyres under the red flag and was able to make the restart without having to have made a pit stop and lose out on time. The AlphaTauri moved up to second place off the restart, inheriting the lead when Lewis Hamilton dived into the pits to serve a time penalty for pitting when the pit lane was closed under the safety car. So because the crash had happened so close to the pit lane entry, they had closed the pit lane. But Lewis and his team, and also I believe it was Kimi Raikkonen in Alfa Romeo, hadn't seen that the pit lane had been closed. So they both went into the pits when it was supposed to be closed and therefore got a penalty that they had to serve. Pierre Gasly then didn't put a foot wrong for the remainder of the race and managed to win it, giving the Italian squad their first race win since Sebastian Vettel's victory at the same venue in 2008. Carlos Sainz, who was in a McLaren at the time, was following in second place, trying so desperately to overtake Gasly in the last few laps. And you've heard me and Iz say several times, "I need this win, Tom."
Yeah.
That's what Carlos Sainz was saying on the radio to his engineer as he was trying to pass Gasly. So now you know where that is from.
Okay.
Extra context for people that don't know, me and Nav will say that when we're really desperate to do something or want something. We will say, "I need this win, Tom."
It's nice now in context.
It is. Okay, let's talk about safety cars. So, in the 2020 Sakir Grand Prix, George Russell was filling in for Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes because Lewis had a little caught the COVID.
Oh.
I know, bless his heart. A safety car was deployed late in the race for a crash, and Mercedes decided to pit both Russell and his teammate Valtteri Bottas for fresh rubber in a double stack. Do you know what a double stack is?
No.
Double stack is where you decide to call both your drivers in, and one after the other. One will get service for a pit stop, leave the pit lane and join the race again, and then the next one will come directly in after that. It's very, very difficult to be able to execute effectively, and teams are almost a little bit dubious to do it because they don't want their first driver to hold up the second driver in case they have a slow pit stop. So they're putting a lot of trust in the pit crew, but when it's done perfectly, it's pure cinema.
And often you have to make sure that there is like a decent amount of time between the first and second driver on track that basically allows you enough time to get them both served like on the same lap.
Okay.
A communication error meant that Russell's tyres had a bit of a mix-up, and he was sent out with a set of Bottas's front tyres on. He then had to pit again immediately for the correct tyres, dropping him down the order. It's illegal to have a mixed set of tyres. You can't have some of your teammates and some of yours, they are all designated to you, so that Pirelli can then gain an advantage in understanding, analysing the data on those tyres after the race. If they're mixed up, the data won't be accurate. To compound the issue, a subsequent virtual safety car period meant he couldn't immediately recover as much ground as he would like. Do you know what a virtual safety car is?
No.
So you know what a safety car is, yeah?
Yeah.
That's when the car comes out and it's driving and slowing down all of the cars and they all sort of bunch up and they drive around all together. A virtual safety car is essentially just a speed limiter that's put on all of the cars. They don't bunch up, but they all go significantly slowly.
Was that because of COVID as well?
Nope.
COVID? What are you about? What, social distancing?
Social distancing
Yeah,
in their cars.
no, they've just made it virtual.
Oh.
Instead of a real one.
No.
That might be the best question you've ever asked. a virtual safety car if there's no real need to bunch all of the cars up? So the reason why they might need to bunch all of the cars up into one straight line and have them all together is because they need to have people out on the track. Marshals, yeah. Or they're trying to recover a car and they need to make sure that everyone is going slowly at the same time so that there's then a long period where the track is completely clear where they're going to be. A virtual safety car is basically, if it's a less severe thing, that it's going to be a quick fix and they just need the cars to drive a bit slowly.
They just have to slow down, but they won't then deploy a safety car onto the track. But the FIA determines the lap time for the cars at each track, and during a virtual safety car, all the gaps between the cars have to be maintained using a delta speed that they must stick to. So they have a certain delta time that they have to stay to so that they can keep those gaps in place. And if they go over that or under that, they can be penalised. A subsequent virtual safety car period meant that he couldn't recover as much ground as he would like to. Despite a heroic recovery drive from George, a late puncture denied him a potential victory. Sergio Perez, who had also pitted under the safety car for fresh tyres, had been last after an early collision, went on to win his first F1 race in a remarkable turnaround.
He went from last to winning?
Yeah.
Damn.
He then got signed for Red Bull.
Oh.
He is now out of a job.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you go to Red Bull.
Yeah, it was a real up and down sentence for you there.
But, I mean, that was essentially the race that got him a job at Red Bull.
Everybody was turning heads for his performance that race.
And it was essentially a thing along the paddock where everyone was just like, how has this guy not got a job when he's managed to do that?
Yeah.
And then he got a job. And possibly the most controversial example of when a safety car along with tyre strategy has altered the outcome of a race is Abu Dhabi 2021.
I know about this one.
But for anyone who doesn't, I will give you a little rundown now. So Hamilton got a better start and immediately took the lead from pole sitter Verstappen. At turn 6 on the first lap, Verstappen made an aggressive lunge down the inside of Hamilton, forcing him off the track, and he cut the corner, maintaining his lead. The race director at the time, Michael Massey, decided it was a racing incident and no penalty was to be given to Hamilton, a decision that was heavily debated. For the majority of the race, Hamilton appeared to have the race and the championship under control because obviously they were going into this final race of the year on equal points. He built up a significant lead over Verstappen, who had pitted earlier. With just a few laps remaining, the race was dramatically altered by a crash from Nicholas Latifi in the Williams. His car came to a stop on track, necessitating the deployment of a safety car. Red Bull immediately pitted Verstappen for a set of new soft tyres, knowing that if the race had restarted, he would have a significant tyre advantage over Hamilton, who had older, harder tyres and did not pit under the safety car. Mercedes had decided to keep Hamilton out on his old tyres, fearing that pitting him would cost him track position. Obviously, because they were ahead, they didn't know what Red Bull were going to do. So if he had pitted and Red Bull stayed out, then Lewis would lose track position. But if they stayed out, they were guaranteeing that he would be restarting the race in first place.
It's always easier in those situations with a live race where you don't quite know what's going to happen if you're actually the car behind, because then your race strategy can essentially be do the opposite to what they do. If they go into the pit, stay out, and if they stay out, pit. So it's always easier for the second car rather than the first car triggering that decision.
The most contentious part of the race unfolded when the lapped cars between Hamilton and Verstappen were instructed that they were allowed to overtake the safety car and move to the back. However, the other cars were not allowed to, and that was a decision made by Michael Massey. Immediately after the 5 cars had unlapped themselves, the safety car was brought in and the race was restarted for one single final racing lap. With the restart on, Verstappen on his new soft tyres was right behind Hamilton on his old worn-out tyres. Going into turn 5, Verstappen made a decisive overtake on Hamilton, taking the lead of the race, and then went on to win the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and in doing so, won his maiden Formula One championship. Hamilton finished in second place, missing out on what would have been a record-breaking 8th world title in the final lap. Mercedes immediately lodged 2 protests after the race, one regarding Verstappen overtaking under safety car before the restart, which was quickly dismissed, and another regarding the safety car procedure and the unlapping of the cars. The second protest led to a lengthy investigation by the FIA, and in the aftermath of the controversy, the FIA announced a structural change to race control, and Michael Massey was removed from his role as race director. The FIA also implemented a clearer set of rules and procedures regarding the safety car and the unlapping of cars.
Can you explain the unlapping of cars?
Yeah, so when there's a safety car, obviously some of the cars in a race get lapped, right? The ones that are further back.
Yeah.
So when there's a safety car and they're all bunched up, they're staying in the order that they were on track. But that's not the order that they are in terms of position, right? So there were 5 cars in between Max and Lewis who were in first and second, who had been lapped by Lewis, but not by Max. And because they were there, they kind of needed to get out of the way in order to have Max and Lewis in first and second place. So normally under a safety car, any cars that have been lapped and were therefore out of position would overtake the safety car, go all the way to the back so that everyone is in the right order for the race restart. However, there wasn't enough time because they wanted one final lap of racing. There wasn't enough time for every single car that was lapped to get out of the way and catch up at the back of the track. So instead, Michael Massey decided that only the cars in between Lewis and Max were allowed to unlap themselves and not the ones that had been lapped by both of them.
Okay.
So it was unfair because only some of the cars were able to unlap themselves. If all of the cars had unlapped themselves, there wouldn't have been enough time to have one final lap.
And the race would have ended under the safety car, which meant that they would have just stayed in the order that they would have carried on in, because you're not allowed to overtake under a safety car.
And that's how it should have ended.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is what the rules and regulations normally state. There was also lots of talk from Toto Wolff on Mercedes talking directly to the race director, and similarly Christian Horner and the rules and regs man from Red Bull talking to the race director, both encouraging him in 2 different opposite directions. And ultimately there was a huge amount of people watching, wanted excitement, wanted a big spectacle, so decided to make this quite controversial move.
Damn, okay.
Right, and that is it. That is all we have to tell you about tyres. How do you feel?
More educated about tyres.
Are you glad that we did this episode?
Sure.
Wait,
Reem!
why are you not happy?
I am happy. I don't know how much. I mean, I think some of it will be useful watching the next races. I don't know if I'll remember all of it.
Well, let's test that with Reem's recap.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, the first question for you is slick. What is slick?
Dry tyres that don't have tread.
Well done. Oh
Very
my god,
nice.
and she used tread.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
I know, I was listening.
Brilliant. What are the current size of the F1 tyres used today?
18 inches.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yes.
Don't know how I remember that one.
How many sets of tyres does each driver get given on a standard Grand Prix weekend?
13.
Very good.
Yay!
Love that.
Reem, I'm actually so impressed.
Thank you.
What colour are all of the tyres for this year?
She's like, black.
Obviously. White for soft.
Nope.
You were doing so well.
What do you mean?
What do you mean? You're incorrect.
What
do you mean? What do you mean?
Colours?
Yeah, you were on the right track. You just got the wrong answer.
Oh, okay. White for hard.
Yeah.
Yellow for medium.
Yeah.
Red for soft.
Yes.
What about the other 2?
What colour are intermediates?
Blue for wet.
Yes. Intermediate?
Green.
Yes.
Yay!
What happens to the tyres after a race?
They get recycled. And they go to cement factories or something.
Yeah. They let them free in a cement factory. Be free tyres.
They get adopted.
Yeah.
What in the hoot and heck is mechanical grip?
Why are you looking at me? Is that all you remember? You remember me talking at one point about mechanical grip?
Yes.
Cool.
I don't remember.
Do you want to do like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire style?
Sure.
Okay, do you want me to do 50-50? So I'll give you 2 answers and one of them's right.
Okay.
Okay, mechanical grip is the interaction between an F1 tyre and the track surface, or mechanical grip is Krusty the Clown.
First one.
Correct.
Well done.
Good work.
Ew, that was a hard one.
What is a double stack?
When 2 drivers from the same team pit at the same time, but it has to be done in a way where the first driver doesn't delay the second one.
Very, very good.
Thank you.
Proud of you.
And what is an overcut?
When you wait to pit so that you can build up more time, so that when you do pit, you're not losing time and you don't get undercut or you don't get overtaken.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. It's good enough. What is the Monte Carlo simulation? I have absolutely no expectation of you knowing this.
It's in France. It's in France.
No, it's not France.
in
Monte
Monaco.
Carlo is in Monaco.
Monaco.
We said this
France?
last time. Last time you said Italy.
They speak French there.
Oh.
Move on. I don't expect you knowing that one. All right, well done. You've
10 out of 10.
well, not quite.
No, absolutely not.
A plus.
No.
A minus.
I give you a B minus.
B minus.
Yeah.
I'd say C+, must try harder.
I'd say at least a B.
Distracts easily.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah. Well, there was no race, so we have no Grand Prix podium.
Me
However,
at the top.
I think I get the Grand Prix.
Yeah, you get prick.
oh,
Oh.
but we will be back next week for the Miami Grand Prix.
The home of Lando's first maiden win. Can he bring it home again?
Make sure you follow us on all of our socials. You can find us on Instagram, X, TikTok, and on YouTube. And much like this episode, we will occasionally be asking for you to submit questions when we have no race on a weekend, so we can do more of these educational episodes. So if there's any questions that you do have, feel free to drop us a message or wait until you see it on our story.
I've designed a very cute Miami Race Week graphic. So if you can find it in your heart to just press that little heart button wherever you're looking at it, I'd really appreciate it, because your girl works full time and it's hard to find time to make these things, but I did it for you.
Make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. Give it a rating because it would massively help us, and share it with a friend who is also trying to learn about F1. Wouldn't it be nice if your friends were able to talk to you about this sport?
Be nicer if you liked my Race Week graphic.
Okay, I don't think we're going to move past
rate
that.
my quiz and give me an A plus.
What?
It would be nice if you rate my quiz and give me an A plus.
I'm just going to end it here.